Despite the fact that the paintwork is of fairly good quality, today it is difficult to find a car in perfect cosmetic condition. Scratches and even chips are an essential attribute of cars at this age, but behold, their absence should alert. As for the corrosion resistance of the body, then, despite its middle age, the metal confidently resists the onslaught of the red disease. Despite the fact that the traces of rust do not appear in the places of chips for a very long time, it is better not to delay their elimination. On cars produced before 2001, there may be traces of corrosion of the threshold from the bottom and on the trunk lid. When visiting a service station and tire fitting, you need to ask the master not to put the blade of the jack under the stiffening ribs. They are quite soft and can deform under the weight of the car. Over time, the axis of the wiper leashes and door locks suffer from the effects of regions. When driving through bumps, a creak comes from the door. If the door hinges creak, get ready to lubricate them every 3 months. Another weak point is the front optics. The protective plastic is sandblasted and cloudy. Also, the disadvantages include the short service life of the shock absorbers, supports of the trunk lid, the fact that it is very heavy and the shock absorbers stop holding it. If the problem is not corrected, there is a risk of serious injury. Skoda Octavia Tour engines are reliable and durable. With proper and timely maintenance, they do not cause much trouble up to 300,000 kilometers. But like any mechanism, power units have certain weaknesses that can be encountered during operation. The most common drawback, characteristic of almost all motors, is increased vibration and floating idle speed. The culprit of this ailment is bad gasoline, which the engine ECU, driving into the rigid framework of ecology, cannot cope with. In some cases, it is possible to fix the problem by flashing the engine control unit. If this does not help, you will have to change the throttle valve. On cars of the first years of production, with a mileage of more than 160,000 kilometers, rings may occur. The reason is short trips or long driving at low speeds. To avoid trouble, it is recommended to periodically spin the engine up to 4 or 5,000 RPM. Vehicles with mileage over 200,000 kilometers have increased oil consumption. To eliminate oil starvation of the power unit on a run of 200–250,000 kilometers, cleaning the oil receiving grid is required. If not cleaned in a timely manner, this can lead to jamming of the camshaft and breakage of the timing belt. Symptoms: drops in oil pressure during prolonged operation of the engine at high speeds. According to the regulation, the timing belt needs to be changed every 90,000 kilometers, but practice has shown that it is better to do this at 60–70,000 kilometers. With every second belt replacement, it is recommended to change the pump as well, since its resource is 150–180,000 kilometers. Poor quality system cooling fans were installed on a batch of cars manufactured after 2007. On most cars, the problem node has probably already been replaced, but just in case, it's better to play it safe and check the fan's performance. The main symptoms are increased noise and vibration. When you scroll the fan with your hands, you feel a backlash. On earlier versions, fans nurse up to 200,000 kilometers. Also, a small thermostat resource on average 50–60,000 kilometers can be attributed to common problems. Often, new owners are frightened by the sudden appearance of a clatter at idle. However, there is nothing terrible about this. A feature of the operation of the gas trunk purge valve. If there is increased noise in the rear seat area, it decreases with increasing speed. It is necessary to pay attention to the condition of the fuel filter. Another weak point is the valve starter. It does not start well in cold weather. In order to save yourself from trouble for many years, it is recommended to replace it with an analog from Bosch. The average starter resource is 150–100,000 kilometers. Once every 120–150,000 kilometers, a replacement of catalyst is required. The crankcase drain plug has a weak thread. When changing the oil, take this feature into account. Tighten carefully so as not to trip the thread. Otherwise, you will have to change the oil pan. Despite the reliability and ease of maintenance of the 1.4 engine, 60 horsepower, buying a car with such an engine is not recommended for several reasons. Firstly, this motor is very weak for this machine. Secondly, if repairs are needed, it will be very difficult to find the necessary spare parts. A more modern 16-valve version of this 74 horsepower engine, installed since 2000, has not only better dynamic performance, but also higher maintenance costs. The 1.4 motor, 74 horsepower, is equipped with timing chain drive, but in this case, this is rather a minus than a plus, since the chain resource is relatively small and the replacement cost is significantly higher than that of a belt. Among the owners of a car with 1.4 engine, there are rumors about the repairability of this unit. Indeed, there are problems with this, but only if you try to do everything according to factory technologies. There are no parts with factory dimensions. On copies with a mileage of more than 200,000 kilometers, the engine is most likely already overhauled. The only question is how good it is. The 1.6 power unit is the most reliable in the line, and its advantages include unpretentious maintenance. With proper operation, the engine is able to serve up to a critical of 300–350,000 kilometers. Minor breakdowns occur mainly due to poor quality fuel and reagents penetrating electrical connectors, pads and blocks, which leads to malfunctions of the power unit. The accumulation of dirt with salt leads to incorrect operation and premature failure of the lambda probe, replacement 50–70 USD. For the same reason, it is quite often necessary to replace the coolant temperature sensors. 3050 CU. The use of low-quality gasoline leads to premature failure of the airflow sensors, 60 CU. After 100,000 km, the EGR valve needs to be replaced. One of the main reasons for an unpleasant visit to the service station can be the electrical gas pedal. The belated response to pressing or freezing keeps the momentum. The 1.8 power unit has a complex design. Because of this, the cost of maintenance and repair is much higher than that of other motors this car. The biggest trouble that can happen with the engine if the engine head fails, in the risk zone for a car with a mileage of more than 150,000 km. On this motor, every 20–30,000 km, a throttle valve flush is required. The first time that it is clogged will be increased fuel consumption, more than 15 liters per 100 km. The appearance of a clattering sound from the engine is the first signal that the hydraulic lifter needs to be replaced. On turbocharged engines, ignition coils are a weak point, often their resource does not exist 80–100,000 km. Be sure to monitor the oil level and keep it closer to max mark, since the turbines suffer from oil starvation very painfully. With timely maintenance, the turbine runs 200–250,000 km. The 2.0-liter 8-valve engine is surprisingly unpretentious, but in terms of reliability is still inferior to the 1.8 engine. The disadvantages of the motor include an unsuccessful piston group, it often cokes. Due to the high operating temperature of the engine, about 105 degrees, there may be problems with the crankcase ventilation system. Operating a car with faulty spark plugs leads to failure of the ignition coils. Diesel engines delight their owners not only with their reliability and good traction, but also with low fuel consumption. Engines running on heavy fuel, like gasoline engines, are not without minor troubles with the thermostat, starter and sensor failure. And here, on a large scale, it will be necessary to invest in the repairs on a run of 180–200,000 km, a replacement of nozzles and a particulate filter. On a 1.9 TDI engine, the high-pressure fuel pump fails. On a run of 230–280,000 km, the time comes to replace the turbine. A little earlier, the boost pressure sensor needs to be replaced. Weak versions of the 1.9 TDI engine do not have a dual-mass flywheel and a variable geometry turbocharger. Most Skoda Octavia Tours on the secondary market are equipped with the 5-speed manual gearbox. Rarely, but nevertheless, there are cars with the 4-speed automatic. And here, to meet a car with the 6-speed mechanics, which was installed in tandem with the most powerful diesel engine, is a great success. The mechanics are reliable, the only complaint that comes from the owners is the fuzzy gear shifting. The reason is the wear of the shaft bearings. If the gears begin to turn on with effort, adjustment of the rotor candles with turbo engines is required. The clutch resource depends not only on the driving style, but also on the engine size. For example, for a transmission paired with a 1.4 and 1.6 engine, the average clutch life is 130–150,000 km, while on the engine 1.8 does not always take care of 100,000 km. On cars manufactured before 2006, on a run of 80–140,000 km, the differential rivets can break, which then destroy the box body. Symptoms: rumble in second gear, jerking at low speeds. Automatic transmission is less reliable than manual transmission. According to many owners, a car with such a transmission is not considered the best option for purchase. The main reason is the capricious valve body. It must be cleaned regularly, even with a timely oil change, every 60,000 km. If this is not done, the valve boost valve, which is responsible for blocking the torque converter and the main pressure control valve, fails. Also, linear solenoids, speed sensors and wiring are not famous for their long life. Most of the Octavia Tours presented on the secondary market are equipped with front-wheel drive. Rarely, but nevertheless, all-wheel drive versions are also found. It is better to refuse to buy such a car for several reasons. Firstly, the Haldex coupling of the time did not have exemplary reliability. Secondly, the clutch maintenance schedule is small, 30,000 km, and most owners of such cars did not properly service it. Therefore, many Octavias have been purely front-wheel drive for several years now. Repairing the clutch will cost a third of the cost of a used car. The chassis of the first-generation Skoda Octavia was borrowed from Volkswagen Golf, in front McPherson, in the back a beam. In the all-wheel drive version of the Multilink, all spare parts are twins. The suspension is quiet and gently smooths out all the bumps in the road. Quite often, when driving at low speeds, forward and backward, the owners are bothered by a knock, the source of which, when contacting the service, is not always possible to identify. The reason is that the engine at low speeds creates vibrations that are transmitted to the exhaust system and it gives it to the body. The problem is not cured. As for the reliability of the suspension, there is nothing to complain about here. The stabilizer bushings serve 40–60,000 kilometers, the racks are up to 80,000 kilometers. Ball bearings have to be changed every 90–110,000 kilometers, a little less often thrust bearings and shock absorbers every 130–150,000 kilometers. Silent blocks, on average, run 150–180,000 kilometers. In a multi-link, once every 100,000 kilometers, you will have to update the bushings of the transverse and trailing arms. The steering system rarely presents unpleasant surprises. The steering rack, as a rule, does not cause problems up to 150,000 kilometers, after which there is a backlash. The replacement of the rack, in most cases, is required closer to 200,000 kilometers. They ask for 200–300 Cu for a new rack. Steering tips go 100–120,000 kilometers, thrust up to 200,000 kilometers. The only place in the steering that requires special attention is the steering column hinge, may appear over time. The brake system is also reliable, but due to the large amount of reagents on our roads, it is necessary to monitor the condition of the brake lines, seal and rings. They corrode strongly. To prevent brake failure, it is recommended to change them forcibly when updating the brake fluid. Despite the fact that the interior design of the car looks outdated and inexpensive, the interior is quite comfortable. For interior decoration, cheap but wear-resistant materials were used, thanks to which, even after many years of operation, the interior does not look shabby. For connoisseurs of luxury, the Lauren and Clement version is available with rich equipment and expensive finishing materials. However, such instances are not common. As for the reliability of electricians, there are a couple of weak points here. Over time, the rear window heating filaments stop working. You can fix the problem. This will require soldering the contacts with special material. On vehicles with mileage over 150,000 kilometers, the air conditioning compressor needs to be replaced. The reason is that the switching valve is clogged. With sudden changes in temperature and an increase in humidity, the instrument panel may fail. Of the minor problems, one can note the frequent burnout of the backlight bulbs of the air conditioning control unit and the stove. If you are the owner of this car model, please describe the problems that you had to face during the operation of the car. Perhaps it is your review that will help readers of our site when choosing a car.